Hey parents, Carmine here with your video review of Dragon Age Inquisition. Dragon Age Inquisition is a game that focuses on story and characters first and foremost. It is a very, very long game. My playthrough clocked in at around 80 hours, and while I took my time, this game is designed for multiple playthroughs. The intricate choices the player has made in the previous Dragon Age titles, and the choices the player will make in Inquisition, will interweave into a complex web of events that will create a unique experience for every player. Yes, the game is about preventing an impending demonic invasion, but it's also about how the player chooses to deal with different characters and social issues. Dragon Age isn't afraid to go out on a limb, something that becomes very obvious the deeper a player explores the various conversation options. Violence is a factor in this game, but I didn't consider it to be a major one. The player will attack enemies with a variety of weapons. While each class will have its own distinct set of weapons, the game basically requires the player to bring along 3 other characters to help in combat, so the player will get to see all 3 character types in action. Normal hits from almost all weapons will result in small splashes of blood, but they don't stick around very long. Some specific enemies will leave behind rib cages to signify where their loot drop is located, but this seemed to happen most often when the player killed animals like bears or goats, not when the player killed people. With some specific exceptions, Gore is relatively absent from the game. There is a scene where the player has to rescue his friends from a dungeon, and at least one of the rooms includes some dismembered bodies, but this is extremely easy to miss and is designed to add to the whole dungeon vibe. The only exception in actual combat is if an enemy is killed with electricity. In this case, the enemy will explode into a shower of blood. But before you go thinking the combat is just going to be blood showering everywhere, this can only be done with electric weapons and is only really noticeable in fights against 1 or 2 enemies at the start of the game. Later in the game, once the player unlocks more abilities and starts fighting more enemies, it becomes really difficult to notice. I found it difficult to see much of anything my enemy was doing when I was simultaneously freezing, shocking, electrocuting, pummeling, poisoning, and shooting explosive arrows into an enemy. Sexuality is a factor in this game, but only becomes especially obvious if the player chooses to pursue a romance with one of the other characters. While a few of the characters will discuss sex, usually in a way that's not particularly graphic, pursuing a romance with a character will eventually result in a sex scene with that character. The sex is never shown, but the topics discussed in the pre- and post-sex conversations can vary in graphicness. None of them are even remotely pornographic, but, for example, Iron Bull's romance can sometimes lead to discussions about safe words. Cassandra's romance, on the other hand, features a very stereotypical romantic scene with candles and poetry, and none of that sort of graphic conversation. Most of the scenes will feature some sort of female topless nudity, however. While that is it for the sexuality, there were 1 or 2 things I feel compelled to mention. Dragon Age has a habit of going out of its way to allow characters and romantic relationships of great variety. Gay and lesbian romances have been included in this game, and one character is a transgender. It's pretty much inevitable that a player will come across at least one homosexual character in their playthrough. So if that's something that you have a serious issue with, just be aware that it's included. The game doesn't promote any particular lifestyle over another, and includes them in a way that adds depth to the characters and the potential romances. Substances, gambling, and use of mature language are present, but are overall rare elements. Aside from the various potions the player can use while wandering around, especially the often used health potions that will basically be a necessity in combat, there are a few specific cutscenes where the characters can be seen drinking and gambling. These are cases of drinking in a social environment or in celebration of a major event like killing a dragon for the first time, and they are not a common occurrence. After many debates and deliberations about the content included in this game and how it compares to other similar titles, we decided that while certain conversations did include mature topics, the content as a whole was much less mature than those in the previous Dragon Age titles. You may disagree depending on your opinion of the content involved, but as a result of the content we viewed in our over 200 hours combined gameplay, we gave this game a recommended age of 14 years old. For the full written review, including the extra categories, log on to SideStoryGames.com.